Hi everybody, I'm Brian. I'm the chess advisor for our chess class. This is a multi-part chess skills for beginners and intermediate class that we host in the library and Learning Commons. Thank you to all the students who joined me today for our class. We meet in the library at 2 p.m. on Thursdays. And today we had part 4 of our multi-part series in chess skills, and we focused on middle game principles. So as you know, there are 3 stages of chess. There's the opening, the middle game, and the end game. So today we're going to talk about middle game principles. The middle game is the part of the game between the opening and the end game. The middle game consists of the majority of the piece development within the game and our movement and capture of the majority of the pieces during the game. In the middle game, we continue to develop our pieces into a structure and a position that we can defend as well as attack. And part of that is we need to know when to trade our pieces and when not to trade pieces. Also in the middle game, we try to gain material with pins, forks, skewers, discovered attacks, discovered checks, that sort of thing. All the tactics, or a lot of the tactics, are happening within the middle game. And also we need to create a plan for the middle game. During the middle game, we need to maintain control of the center 4 squares by placing pawns and defended pieces on those squares. At least one of our pawns should be in the center so that it can help us attack on either side of the board and keep our opponent on the defensive. If we attack without center control, we could be exposed to a counterattack in the middle of the board, and our pieces could be split between 2 sides, making us vulnerable. Pieces generally increase in power as they contact the center, even from a distance, so we need to position our minor pieces and our major pieces so that they cover or attack through those center squares. We should place our queen in front of our bishops or behind our rooks so that we can create powerful attacks. We also try to form batteries when attacking. We'll talk a little bit about that when we start talking about tactics. We should double up our rooks on the same file, especially on open files. We should advance our pawns to the opening lines, and we need to attack where we control more space. So if we control more space on the sides, that's where we attack from. If we control more space in the center because maybe we formed a pyramid with our pawns, we need to attack towards the center. In terms of trading pieces, this is one of the things that I've heard many YouTubers like Levi Roseman. He's Gotham Chess. He has said many times, don't trade pieces without good reason. The grandmasters don't do it, and we shouldn't either. So don't trade pieces unless we have a good reason for it. Just don't trade just to trade. If you need to trade, generally trading a knight for a knight or a bishop for a bishop is okay. However, some advanced players consider bishops slightly more powerful than knights. Bobby Fischer used to say back in the day that he preferred bishops over knights because he says that they are worth more than knights, slightly more. In open positions, do not trade a bishop for a knight because bishops can move along those long diagonals, and if the position is open, we need to keep our bishops protected or close by because they can move a lot faster and we can attack the enemy king along those long diagonals. In closed positions, where maybe we have some pawns that are locked up perhaps in the center and they can't move, we don't want to trade bishops for knights because if we lose our knights, we can't really jump around the board. Those knights can jump over pawns pretty easily. So if we get rid of our knights or we trade our knights for bishops, then in closed positions it makes things a little more difficult because we can't move around as easily. If you prefer to use bishops, I like to play with my bishops over knights, try to open up the board by trading pawns. If you have an open position, as I said before, those bishops work really well on long diagonals if there's not a lot of pawns in the way, or other pieces for that matter. If you are ahead in material by at least 3 points, it can be a good idea to trade queens or to trade pieces down for that matter, because when we can get into the end game while we are up in material, perhaps we can have an easier time checkmating our opponent because they have less material than we do, and we should be able to hopefully win if we're ahead of material. All right, what's a good versus a bad bishop? So a good bishop can move freely along open diagonals because pawns primarily rest on the opposite color as the bishop. So if we have, like I said, we're white and we have our bishop on the white squares, you want to try to make sure that your pawns are on those dark squares so that we have what we call as a good bishop. It moves very freely along those diagonals. A bad bishop would have difficulty moving on those diagonals because the pawns might be in the way. So those are called bad bishops. So sometimes it's a good idea to exchange your opponent's good bishop for our bad bishop. So think about that as you play your games. You know, if you're white or black and you have a bishop on the white squares, don't block the bishop in by having pawns and other pieces on those white squares. Move them to dark squares so your light squared bishop can move freely. If you have two bishops, having both bishops later in the middle game can be very powerful because you can easily control more of the board. There's been so many games that I have played where I'll line up both bishops like this going across the board on those long diagonals. You can control a lot of the board that way. So it's a good idea to keep that bishop pair through the majority of the game if you can. Don't let the center become too closed with pawns because your bishop again needs to have those long diagonals. So if you've got especially a bishop pair, try to open up your position a little bit so that they can move more freely. Also, try to keep your enemy knights away from the center of the board. Remember, they can jump around the board pretty easily. If they're in the center, they have more control or more spaces, more squares they can go to. So keep those enemy knights away from the center of the board. Try to drive them to the sides so they have less impact on the game. They have less squares they can attack or retreat to. Some more middle game principles. Create, as I said, open diagonals so your bishops can move more easily. If you have one bishop, again, try to move those pawns of yours to pieces on the opposite color of your bishop. So again, your bishop can move pretty freely along those diagonals. When kings castle on the opposite side, okay, so maybe you've got your king has castled on the king side towards the right side of the board. Maybe your opponent has castled the queen side on the opposite side of the board. Try to attack with your pawns on your enemy king. We can call that a pawn storm. Try to storm those pawns up towards your enemy king so you can break apart their protection and try to expose the king. Also, when attacking the king, open up the file or a diagonal so that your pieces can easily attack. Sometimes you can trade pawns off and get your opponent's pawns in a doubled up pawn structure. And then you can have, like I said, these open files or diagonals to attack on. Move rooks and queens to open files. We've talked about that before. Have a clear plan or a clear idea of where you need to go and what you need to do. You definitely need to think about your position and what are the best ways to attack your opponent. Do not expose your king with queens on the board. As you know, queens can move to a lot of different squares. So you want to make sure that your king is well protected, even behind three pawns, to make sure that the enemy queen can't attack you. Don't let the center become closed with pawns. We talked a little bit about that. Keep enemy knights away from the center of the board. I think we talked about that. Your position is more important than your material. I've heard that several times now by several people. I know Jesse Cry from the dojo, Chess Dojo, has talked about that in some of his videos. I've also heard Ginger GM. His name is Simon Williams. He's talked about that on his channel. So look at your position. And if perhaps your opponent might be a pawn or two ahead, if you have a solid position and maybe they have a closed position, a lot of times chess engines will say that you're actually in the lead because you have a better position and maybe your pieces are more developed. So your position is more important than material in many cases. Always try to control the center of the board. We've talked about that in other videos. Avoid isolated pawns. So that is a pawn that has an empty file on both sides. Or not an empty file, but there's no pawns on either file next to the pawn. So try to avoid that if you can. Try to have them in groups of at least 2 or more. We can call those islands, so pawn islands, so that they can defend each other. Keep all pieces protected, and especially avoid hanging pieces. Remember the Botez sisters, if you've ever watched them on YouTube. They're funny to watch. They're great. They're both expert chess players. They have something called the Botez Gambit, which means, they had a hanging queen and they lost the queen because they were thinking about something else, or maybe they're playing, speed chess. They hung their queen and they lost it. So don't do a Botez Gambit. Those two look them up. They are really fun to watch. But yeah, try not to avoid any hanging pieces. Try to make sure your pieces are well defended as you develop. Keep your rooks on open files. We've talked about that. If during trading is happening during the game and perhaps you don't have any pawns on one of the files, stick a rook there. Same thing with your queen. If you can, having queens and having rooks on those open files are a great thing to do. Keep pressing forward and keep your back protected. So throughout the middle game, keep pressing forward with your pawns to gain more space. Trade pieces only when it's to your advantage. We talked about that. If grandmasters don't trade their pieces, neither should you without good reason. So, but again, if it's to your advantage, perhaps you're up a piece. Maybe you won a trade somehow, and you picked up a hanging piece. Then you want to trade pieces, get down to the end game. Especially if you're playing more advanced players than you. I've played some players who are in the 200, 300 points above me, and if something happens and I pick up an extra piece somehow, then you want to trade your pieces down so that you get the end game and hopefully win the game. Do not trap your king. How many times have I seen it where myself included will castle the king on the king side, and you keep those 3 pawns in front of the king? Well, what happens if you're not paying attention? Your opponent swings a rook down or a queen down, and all of a sudden they've checkmated you with a back rank checkmate. In those cases, you definitely want to create an escape square by making one of the 3 pawns in front of your king, pushing it forward. I usually take the pawn to the right of the king, push it forward 1 square, and then you've got an escape square for your king. And keep your pieces in a place where they can easily get to your king. Sometimes this happens when maybe our king we castled king side, but our attack is coming from the queen side. Well, if we don't have our pieces in a position that we can easily get those over to protect the king, a lot of times our opponent can swoop in and get checkmate because our pieces are on the opposite side of the board. So try again to move your pieces or keep your pieces on the side of your king, or at least in a way that they can get to your king very quickly to defend it. So things to think about as you're making each move. I've heard a lot of grandmasters say this in their videos. Look for checks, captures, and attacks for both you and your opponent. Every move, look for checks, captures, and attacks. Can I check the enemy king? Can I capture a piece? Especially if, and chances are that they have a hanging piece. Look for those attacks that you can pick up extra material and hopefully win. This is exactly the second point I'm just trying to make here. Am I ahead or behind in material? If I'm behind in material, you do not want to just exchange pieces. You need to keep your pieces so that you have a better chance of defending yourself and attacking the enemy king. So look at your position and the pieces that you have on the board. Are you ahead or behind in material? Are my pawns well placed, and do they attack or defend against my opponent? A lot of times we'll have hanging pawns. They can be picked off pretty easily. Or perhaps there's pawns in the way of a bishop and therefore making it a bad bishop. See if you can move those pawns to make your bishop more active. So pay attention to your pawns. Look to see if there are ways you can improve your pawn structure so that you can have a better attacking game. Can I move my minor and major pieces around easily? That kind of goes back to my previous point of making sure that you have enough space in the area that you control so that you can move those pieces fairly easily around to defend your king. or to attack too. More things to think about with each move. Is my king safe from attack? That goes again with making sure you have an escape square if you need it. You don't want to get back rank checked or checkmated. Is there a threat from my opponent? So before you make a move, do you see a threat from your opponent? Or if you're picking up a piece or thinking about moving a piece, if I move my piece to this square, is my piece under attack? Or when I moved my piece, was it defending another piece, and therefore now I have a hanging piece, an undefended piece? So you definitely want to take a look at, as you're moving your pieces, where am I moving to? The board changes every time you make a move. The board changes, and there are always risks. So make sure as you move your pieces around that you're not moving a piece that's defending another piece and therefore making the defended piece undefended. Or is the square that I'm going to under attack? Or perhaps did I move my original piece into a spot where now maybe I had a queen behind it, and now it is on the same diagonal, and now it's open for attack. So look at all those things before you make your move. And also think about what is my opponent about to do, and should you do another move to prevent that or to attack. More things to think about with each move. When attacking your opponent's king, you may need to open a file or diagonal so that your pieces can attack that king. Take a serious look at that. See if there are ways, like I said, either using a pawn storm, or maybe you want to exchange pieces. If it means that maybe your opponent has three pawns in front of it, but maybe there's a knight right there that's being defended by one of those pawns. Well, you might want to swap those two pieces or trade those two pieces if it means now that the pawn that's in front of the enemy king is now a double pawn to the side, and you've just opened up a file with direct access to the king. So look for things like that as you play. Most importantly, I think, don't be afraid to fail, because we all learn from our mistakes. Even if you do make a mistake, don't give up. Your opponent can blunder. How many times have I seen that, where I'll make a crazy mistake and I'll lose a rook and I'll think the game is the game is lost. And then later in the game, I'll notice that my opponent wasn't planning out their attack right, and then all of a sudden they have a hanging queen, and I just picked off the queen, and now I'm in control of the game. So don't give up, even if you lose your queen. Sometimes your opponent will blunder, and you can quickly change the game around. I think I've shared some games with you already where I was behind, and suddenly something happened, and then suddenly I'm ahead. I know I've got more games like that coming up where I'll be behind, I'm playing an advanced player, all of a sudden, just because of the way that I position my pieces, all of a sudden I'll pick up a hanging piece and now I'm ahead. So don't give up, don't be afraid to fail, learn from your mistakes, especially if you're recording your games. Then you can analyze them yourself, you can look to see what you did wrong. And once you do that, write your notes. What I do on chess.com is, after a serious game, I will load up the game. I'll take a look at all of my moves, and key places I'll write notes about what I was thinking. Maybe it was I didn't know what to do in this position, and I'll analyze it later. But there are other places maybe where I made a mistake or I had a great tactic. I'll make little comments in those in that game so that I can review it later and learn more about it. Then after I do that, I spend maybe 15 minutes on it. That's, again, I'm at a beginner intermediate level. More advanced players obviously spend a lot more time. Jesse Cry, when he talks about it on Chess Dojo, he encourages his students to write quite a bit of notes on a game and spending a lot of time on your game. I can't do that just because I have work and family obligations. But if you can spend, I think last night I was working on a game. I spent about a half an hour evaluating that game, and I had a good chunk of text that I demonstrated to a bunch of students today. So yeah, learn from your mistakes, analyze your games. Oh, like I was going to say, so analyze it yourself first. Don't use the engine. That's going to help you. You're going to help you learn. And then once you've gotten as much out of it as you can from your own views, then look at the chess engine. That chess.com, for example, they use Stockfish, I believe. You can get membership plans that use more powerful chess engines, but then look at the moves that they recommend and see why those are better, and perhaps that will help you learn from the game you just played. Alright, we have an example game here that we're going to go through real quickly. Let me see if I can get a hold of that real quick. This is a game that I played, obviously, in chess.com against Andrew. Andrew was the president of our club last year. We do play from time to time. He now is in another state, and he is a tournament player. He joined our Grand Rapids Chess Center, our local chess club, where he played tournaments and stuff, etc. And so he moved to another state, and he is playing a lot more tournaments out there. So this was one game that I played against Andrew. He is, I think at that time he was our top player in the club, but let's kind of go through the game and see what I wrote about this. Actually, this isn't the game I wanted to show you. There's a different game. Hold on. I did show the club, our chess students, this game today, but that's not the game I wanted to show for this presentation. Sorry, I just hit my mic. This is the game this is another game. The game that I just showed you right just a minute ago, that's the one I spent about a half an hour on. I spent maybe 15-20 minutes writing my own comments, and then I went back again, and as I was reviewing the game, I was looking at what Stockfish said was the best moves, where I blundered, that sort of thing. So that's what Jesse Cry from the Chess Dojo has said several times. Do your own analysis first, and then do it with the chess engine, because a lot of times we'll learn more from the stuff that we identify later, rather than just learning it from a chess engine. I'm sure he describes or explains that a lot better than I just did. I'd highly recommend the Chess Dojo. They do have a membership plan that you can join their cohort and play people on their in their program. I highly recommend it. I wish I could join. Right now it's a little out of my price range, but because I can't spend a lot of money on chess right now. But if you've got a little extra money, seriously consider joining their cohort. I highly recommend it. Their videos on Chess Dojo are fantastic. All right, let's go through this game quick. By Killer Clyde 1021. He is in our chess club online on chess.com. As you can see, Killer Clyde is higher than me at this point. I think I said in a previous video that there was a point where I was timing out in a lot of my games, so my rating went down quite a bit very fast because I missed, I don't know what it was, 20 games or 25 games. Something happened and some family stuff, and I just missed them. So my rating dropped quite a bit. But anyway, so Killer Clyde is about a 1300 level player. Let's go through the games. For the game, d4, e6, bishop to f4, b6, pawn move to b6. I move my knight to f3, and black moves his bishop to b7. So black is fianchettoing the bishop to attack my king side. As you can see with this fianchetto here, they have a really nice attacking diagonal on, or a nice attack going down this diagonal. Excuse me. Okay, oops. The next move was I pushed a pawn. As you can see, I've been studying the London, which a lot of grandmasters say is a lazy opening. I'm at the point where I just want something that is fairly easy to learn. A lot of chess players like it because you can play it really against almost any black opener, and I don't know, I just like the London. I mean, a lot of grandmasters are playing it now. Magnus Carlsen played it, and I want to say Tata Steel maybe. Oh no, he played the Catalan in the Tata Steel. But I have seen some games by even Magnus Carlsen, who has played the London system. So, all right, let's keep going. F5, pawn to F5. As I said in my notes, I am setting up my pieces for the London system opening. I have been studying it for several months now. I've watched a really good series on chess.com by Ginger GM. Again, that's Grandmaster Simon Williams. I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube, especially from Levi Roseman. That's Gotham Chess. He has some really good opening videos, and he does a really nice one on the London too. So if you're interested, look those people up. I do have a chess-based video that it's called the London System. Is it revised or not redrawn? Reloaded, I think it is. London System Reloaded. That's also by Grandmaster Simon Williams, Jitter GM. And I look forward to going through that DVD. So anyway, like I said, London System. Next is played is bishop to d3, knight to f6, I castle, b to e7, or bishop to e7, knight to c3. Hold on a second, my phone is telling me I'm almost out of power. Hopefully that didn't mess up the video. Knight to c3. What I'm saying here is I should have moved to c4 first, and here's why. This pawn here, had I moved to c4 first, then I would have a nice spot for my knight to go to after I move my c-pawn. And the reason is because now in its current location, this pawn on c2 is blocked in by my knight. So I think, I can't remember what Stockfish said at that point that I moved it, but I probably should have moved the pawn first and then moved my knight. Okay, black castles. Now, in this position, both kings have castled. I have more space, I feel. I have more space, and all of my minor pieces are developed. So you can see my minor pieces, the bishop, the knight, that bishop, that knight, they're all developed and in place. For example, black, though, they have not developed their knight, and their bishop is blocked in by their knight here. Yes, this bishop has a diagonal, but nothing's really going on over on this side of the board. So I feel like black is a little more cramped. My position is a little more open. The next move was h3. At this point, I was thinking, if by some chance black starts to attack my bishop and come forward with their pawns, eventually attacking my bishop here, I need an escape square for my bishop. Otherwise, it would be, or could be, easily trapped, and I could lose my bishop pretty easily. So that's why I moved my pawn. I'm not sure if that was the best thing to do at that time, but that's why I moved my pawn. Again, when you are going through these games, after you play them, it's a good thing to put as many notes down as you can. That way, when you analyze it with a chess engine later, you can see if your thinking is right. All right, knight to e4. I move my knight back to d2. Their knight takes c3. My pawn takes their knight. So basically what just happened is black swaps knights, and now I have double pawns on this c-file. You can see here and here I've got double pawns. One okay thing that I thought might be okay is if I move my knight or my rook here, I've got an open file here. So maybe that's not so bad, but I did not like to have double pawns in that position. As you can see, Stockfish still says that we're still about even. White might be a little bit behind black in this position, but it's still pretty close. Okay, black pushes a pawn to d6. I move my queen to e2. Black moves his bishop to g5. Now his bishop is attacking. Not that. His bishop is attacking my bishop. So I trade bishops. He takes with the queen. We swap bishops. Black has me in checkmate on the next move. Do you see it? I saw it as I was playing. This game, I don't believe was a rapid game. I believe it was a daily game. Usually I play 3 days a move, unless I specifically want to play like a 20-minute game, 10 minutes per side. So as I was reviewing this game in this position, I noticed that black has me in checkmate in this next move because they can go to this square, this g2 square, and that g2 square is covered by their bishop. So they have me in checkmate. So what I do is I push a pawn. I think this was a wasted move. This is why. What I think I should have done is just push the pawn all the way to f4, attacking their queen, because if black, still takes this pawn, because the square is empty now, I can still take with my queen. If they take with their bishop, I can take with my king. So in my analysis, I don't know if this is right, I need to check it out a little bit further, but I'm feeling like I should have pushed that pawn all the way to f4, not just to f3. So in the end, that loses me a tempo. Okay, so black just moved their knight to d7. I moved my pawn to d4. So that's the rest of that move that I said I should have just done right from the start and not wasted a move or wasted a tempo. They moved their queen back to g6. I pushed the pawn to e4, attacking their pawn on f5. They take, I take with my knight. They move their queen back to f7. Now you can see that our evaluation over here is saying that white is way ahead. As you can see, we are not ahead in material, but Stockfish is saying we are ahead in this position because of what we can do later with our pieces. So let's keep going through. I move my knight to g5. I have a nice attack going on the queen as well as the h7 square, because it's guarded or attacked again by my bishop on d3. So there's a nice attack going there. I feel it's a serious threat to black, because I have a serious threat coming to black's king pretty soon. So they move their queen out of the way. I keep kicking black's queen so that I can attack the king. I move my knight to h7. Again, it's covered by my bishop. So I just pick up a pawn. He can see the pressure is mounting on the king, so he moves his rook to f7. I move my queen to, g4. They move their knight in to f6, attacking my queen. So I move my queen to g6, adding a lot more pressure again to the king. I do like this next sequence that happens. He exchanges my knight. I take my knight back, giving him check. He moves his king out of the way. I go in for checkmate. This is a nice checkmate. What I'm saying is, as a final thought to this game, that it really never made it into the end game, because I feel like it was completed basically in the middle game, because there's still a lot of pieces on the board. But I love that sequence. Like I said, the queen coming in. I've seen that so many times, like I said, from Ginger GM and from Levy, pulling your bishop for this nice long diagonal right here, and moving your queen in basically to this square. I guess it's the same one, and then up, and then there's just nothing they can do. So I hope you enjoyed that game. I like the game. That sounded strange, but I do love chess. I just wish I were better at it. But anyway, if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Again, I strongly suggest, just as the Chess Dojo does, and Jesse Cry and his colleagues there, they always say to analyze your games afterwards. Even if you're not that strong of a chess player, write down your thoughts. What were you thinking about the game? What are some of the things you could have done differently? Did you miss any tactics? Did you miss any pins or skewers or forks? Not just for you, but for your opponent too. Take a look at those things, write them down, then use the chess engine and write additional notes. So again, thank you for joining us. If you are a student of ours, come into the library on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. We have one of these classes every single Thursday, every Thursday at 2 o'clock. Obviously, sometimes I may have meetings or vacation, so I do send out emails. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. I usually post these after every class on Thursday. I record them at home the night after, or the same night, excuse me, and then I post them on YouTube. If you're interested in joining our I'm calling it master class. It's not a master class. It's more of a chess fundamentals class. But if you want to join us, please join us in person. Join us online. Write comments if you have questions, or if you see things in these games or in my presentations that I miss. I'm just a chess player just like you, and we all are from different levels of chess. So I learn too, and I need to learn more, and I'm trying. So let me know what you see, and hopefully we can all improve together. Thanks for joining us. Again, share the video if you like. Leave a comment. If you want to join the club, let me know, and I can add you to our email distribution list. We also, part of our chess class, our fundamentals class, we're starting a what do you call that? Sort of a curriculum-based checklist of things to do. We're trying to spend the next semester or two on certain books, and like we're going to work on Puzzle Rush on chess.com. We're going to play each other. We're going to analyze our games. We're going to read a few books, watch some videos, that sort of thing. So if you want to join us, send me an email or contact me in the chat, and I'll get back to you. Thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate you spending the time with us and helping us all learn and love the game of chess. Take care. Bye-bye.